Yeah, because most, and it's not just collaboration, it's even consolidation. So there are various aspects of consolidation of aviation in Africa. So most airlines in Africa are government owned, so they have to have sign-offs from their governments, okay? And it needs to be, from a policy point of view, that African airlines should collaborate more, in fact, consolidate more. So if they are private entities, that would be easy. It's a merger and acquisition kind of thing. But now here we are dealing with state-owned entities, which need sign-off by governments. So governments have not yet authorized, or they've not bought into this whole idea of collaboration. And that's what we're trying to do, to sensitize African governments that this is actually beneficial, not just for their specific airline, but for Africa collectively. Okay. So currently we are 16% interconnected. So we're talking about intra-Africa traffic. This should improve to at least 50%, because in Asia, they're at about 45%, between 45 and 50%. In Europe, they're at 70% connected. So how do you do that? You do that by more flights. And if you can connect using land, you also do rail and you do road. But as you know, in Kenya, in Africa rather, we have deficiencies when it comes to alternative means of connectivity. So the best way to connect Africa is through aviation. And the best way to do that is to increase scale. In other words, to have bigger airlines, or more connected airlines, or more collaborative airlines. Okay, and that needs to be done quickly. So today we have 2% of global air traffic. And Africa as a continent is 18% of the world's population. So therefore, there's a gap of 16%. So we're not even saying we should go to 16%. We're saying we should move from 2% to something more respectable. Let's say 10%. That way you'll see a marked difference when it comes to connectivity. You can fly directly to any African city if you have a 10% global traffic. You will see that the cost of travel within Africa will drop significantly because of scale. And you'll see that there's going to be an increase of trade. There's going to be an increase in tourism, African tourism. And obviously the ripple effect will be that the economies will improve, there will be more activity, economic activity, and it's all good for everybody. So in my reading, infrastructure, but that's not the main cause. The root cause is Africa has not identified aviation as a key strategic economic pillar for the economic development. So Africa, apart from just a few African countries, then they go for other things. And I'm not saying they're wrong. So for example, they focus on agriculture. They focus on tourism with exclusion of aviation and many other things. But the good thing with aviation, it is an aggregator. So if you think about employment, education, if you think about logistics, if you think about agriculture because of export of agricultural goods, trade because of trade of commodities, if you think about tourism because we bring in tourism, all those things are integrated in aviation. So by growing aviation, you actually, by extension, are supporting all other sectors of economic development. But that's not the way we've done it in Africa. In other words, what we've done is we've focused on the primary sources of economic development. But my argument is, why don't you look at the catalyst? And then by extension, it will help other sources. And it's been, if you look at other countries, think about Dubai, for example. One of the reasons Dubai is what it is today is because it has a very flourishing aviation sector. Qatar, same thing. Singapore, Korea, name all those countries that we all admire and say that they are a high growth rate. It's because they have identified aviation as key and central to economic development. That's what we should do in Africa as well. So the point that I was making is, because when you talk about sustainability, that's a very broad term. But inevitably people think about environmental sustainability. Environmental sustainability or climate action is critical and it's important. It's part of our sustainable development goals that have been laid out by the United Nations. So that we should focus on. And that's why you keep hearing people talking about SAF and other measures so that we can make sure that we are decarbonizing the environment, reducing the emissions. That's important. What I'm saying is that should not be looked at in isolation. Because sustainability involves many, many aspects of life. So, for example, how do we make sure that people in Africa have enough to eat, for instance. That's what sustainability is all about, social sustainability. Or, for example, how do you make sure companies in Africa are economically sustainable for the long haul? In other words, they can year on year continue living so that they can employ more people for purposes of making sure we reduce unemployment, we reduce poverty, and we reduce dependability. So sustainability should be looked at in a broader perspective, not just environmental, because all these things are interconnected. The danger that we have is that because the other aspects of sustainability have more or less been dealt with in other parts of the world, of course, therefore, that is the main discussion point, which is environmental sustainability. In Africa, we're still grappling with these other elements. So when we talk, we should try and integrate them so that it makes more sense to have a discussion around environmental sustainability, economic and social, all at the same time. Europe is doing what is best for Europe. So we have our destiny in our own hands. We have to decide what is good for Africa. Okay? They don't impose things for us. So, for example, their mandate is that if you're flying to Europe, you have to blend 2% of your fossil fuels with SAF. Okay? I mean, that's what they want. Okay? So we have to decide what is good for us as Africa. Okay? So, for example, they have made a decision that for them to be more sustainable as airlines, they need to come together. They need to collaborate and even consolidate. So if you look at European airlines, they are huge because they've come together. Air France, KLM is now one group. And those, separately, they are big enough, but now they've come together. That tells you something. It tells you they are thinking about their future and sustainability of their airlines. In Africa, we've done exactly the opposite. We have small little airlines popping up everywhere. They're not sustainable because in aviation you have to have scale. Yeah, if you have few aircraft, 30 aircraft, 50 aircraft, that's a small airline. You need to be big, and not just because it's sustainable, but because we have a mandate as African Airlines to connect Africa to Africa and Africa to the world. Now, if you are small, then you are not connecting. So we should be able, from Kenya, to fly to any point in Africa. But the only way to do that is to have scale. So that's the argument, is that let's do what is good for Africa. Europe will do what is good for Europe. But if you don't do what's good for Africa, they'll impose. I say let's urgently, as Africa, let's collaborate more. And in my field, I would say in aviation, let's work better together and urgently, and stop unnecessary competition.
There's three main things that I would recommend that we have done in the past. The first is to pilot as many solutions as possible. For instance, we were the first airline to mix SAF into our regular operations in 2011, and also in 2021 we were the first airline to mix eSAF, synthetic SAF, into our tanks. So testing and learning, seeing what is possible, is the first thing I would really recommend to also do here. The second thing is to invest. If possible at all, try and invest in factories, try and invest in new breakthrough technologies, because we need new types of feedstock, new types of production facilities to really bring scale and bring down the prices of SAF. And the third, for airlines specifically, is to have a sourcing strategy and a sourcing policy whereby we try to really play a role in the value chain, for instance, through letters of intent, MOUs, but also guaranteed offtake agreements, because that's often the security that producers need in order to really scale up their own production. So we've seen that policy is incredibly important to scale SAF. And in Europe we have a mandate, which is a so-called stick. So it brings responsibility to the airlines to source more SAF. We recommend mandates, but we also recommend that there's subsidies to go along with those types of mandates, because we know the price of SAF is 3 to 4 times more expensive than regular kerosene, and eSAF is even 10 times more expensive. So we need public policy, but also subsidy to really make this a reality. The third is also to there's three things that should happen from a policy perspective. First of all, there should be commitment and policy recommendations from the governments. For instance, a mandate, but that's a stick. We also think that there should be carrots, subsidies wherever possible. Then there also needs to be a lot of investments in technology. So how can we ensure that we share the technology that's out there? There's a lot of best practices, there's a lot of proven technology. How do we make sure that we get that technology, that information also here on the African continent, ready to use open source wherever possible. And then lastly, I think we need to work together. We need to see how we can scale, how we can bring the prices down, how we can demonstrate commitment, collaboration, but also those concrete steps by working together, small scale in public-private partnerships. So we're working together a lot with all 27 airlines that are participating in the Aviation Challenge, but we also work together specifically, for instance, with Virgin in realizing their SAF 100 flight from London to New York. So we tested whether the motors of those planes could actually deal with 100% SAF in our engine test bed. So I think that's exactly how we want to work together. We want to test, learn, share the knowledge that is required to make those concrete actions possible. And in this case, that was with the SAF 100 flight for Virgin Atlantic. But we're also working together with a lot of airlines, trying to see how we can persuade customers to also buy more SAF. So for instance, we offer XP points from our loyalty program, which a lot of other airlines are also doing together with us, and we're blending 100% SAF on all Aviation Challenge flights. So I think the governments, also on the African continent, can learn from the European Commission and the European continent in three ways. First of all, we have a very clear commitment. We have very clear policies around both the amount of SAF that we need to blend and also the criteria of the SAF that we blend. So there's a level playing field to that extent within the European Union. Secondly, there's also a lot of initiatives we're now looking at that will bring down the cost of SAF, because this is one of the biggest bottlenecks to increase the use of SAF. It's the price. The fact that SAF is 4 or 5 times more expensive than regular kerosene, synthetic SAF even 10 times more expensive. We need to find mechanisms that bring down the price, and governments play a very, very big role on this. And the third is ensuring that there's a real good exchange of knowledge and infrastructure that's out there, because SAF has proven technologies. We know how to do it. We don't know how to mature the technology yet, but we do know how to do it. And I think here we need to ensure that there's a sharing of knowledge. And I think the Aviation Challenge, for one, is a fantastic way to do that, because we openly share all that we know around SAF, and hopefully this will also bring acceleration of SAF production on the African continent. I leave this room feeling very excited, motivated, and also hopeful, because I saw a lot of people in the room either representing the government, representing the industry, representing airlines. They all are clear that they're committed, they are motivated to bring change, and I believe with that willpower that the real acceleration of SAF on the African continent can and will take place, and it really excites me.